Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking what feels like the ultimate evolutionary shortcut. We're tracing a line from the tiniest biological investment you can imagine, literally a single cell, all the way to the most complex psychological challenges we face.
In our own relationships.
In our closest human relationship.
That really is the mission today. We're connecting the dots from entomology through evolutionary biology and right into, modern relationship therapy.
So the sources you've given us start with the sex life of a fruit fly.
They do. And they end with why you and your partner might argue about something as simple as the dishes. It all comes back to this idea of investment asymmetry.
Okay, let's unpack that. Our journey begins, a bit bizarrely, in a lab with the humble fruit fly Drosophila.
Right.
It seems like a strange place to start for human relationships, but this tiny creature, it gave us the foundational data for so much of sexual selection theory. Why them? Why Drosophila?
Well, it's just the perfect model system for genetics research. I mean, they're small, they have an incredibly short life cycle.
You're talking generations in days, right?
Exactly, days. And they have a huge reproductive rate. So for researchers, it means you can manipulate traits and then watch evolutionary changes happen across many, many generations very quickly.
And when you actually look at them up close, they are, physical marvels. I was really surprised by some of the facts about their locomotion in the sources.
Oh, they're truly remarkable. Their wings beat something like 220 times per second. It's astonishing.
Wow.
But it's their flight path that's really amazing, especially during courtship or when they're trying to escape. They use these rapid, jerky turns.
Saccades, they're called.
Saccades, exactly. They can pivot their entire body 90 degrees in about 50 milliseconds.
That sounds like just a tremendous expenditure of energy.
It is, and that's the key. These high-cost maneuvers, especially that chase during courtship, it immediately gives you this tiny, insect-sized example of the investment a male have to put in just to get a mating opportunity.
A tiny parallel to what we'll see later in humans.
Precisely.
So that really sets the stage for Angus Bateman's work in 1948, using Drosophila melanogaster. He defined what we now call Bateman's principles, which really became a cornerstone of the whole theory. What was his big finding?
Bateman, he identified this inherent asymmetry, kind of economic imbalance in reproduction.
Okay.
He found that males showed a much, much higher variance in two things: the number of mates they had and the number of offspring they produced.
So a much bigger range of success.
A huge range. And crucially, the link between mating success and reproductive success, we call the Bateman gradient, was way steeper for males.
So for the guys, the more partners, the more their success just shot up. But for females?
For females, the line was much flatter. His conclusion from this was that the primary pressure of sexual selection falls on the males. It led to this, very widely accepted idea of the eager male trying to maximize opportunities and the coy selective female.
But this is where the deep dive gets critical, because the sources point out that this finding, this whole Darwin-Bateman paradigm it's intensely debated today.
Oh, absolutely.
So if it's so foundational, what's the twist? What did the modern reanalysis find?
This is fascinating. Researchers recently went back and analyzed Bateman's original handwritten lab notes from 1948.
His actual notes.
It's his actual notes. And when they recrunched the numbers with modern statistics, the data itself, it just didn't seem consistent with the principles he came up with. Some now argue the variance for males might have been exaggerated by, the way his experiment was set up.
So the universality of this eager male, coy female thing is now being questioned, even if the core idea that investment creates an asymmetry is still pretty compelling.
Exactly, and that forces us to look at where that disparity really begins. Anisogamy, that's the biological foundation. It's just the massive difference in the size of the gametes.
Eggs versus sperm.
Right. Females produce these large, limited, and very costly eggs. Males, on the other hand, produce small, abundant, and biologically cheap sperm.
And the sources give a fantastic evolutionary example of how that switch happened.
They do. You can literally trace the path from isogamy, where all the gametes are the same size, to anisogamy, creatures like bulbocene green algae.
So we can see it evolving.
We can. And it seems to come down to a single gene, the male-limited MID gene. That one tiny genetic switch created probably the biggest economic disparity in all of biology.
And when you scale that concept up to humans, the asymmetry just becomes monumental.
It's huge. The female's obligatory investment is already massive, 9 months of gestation. Then it continues with lactation, which you need to fuel the human baby's enormous developing brain. This difference is what Robert Travers, in 1972, formalized as parental investment theory. or PIT.
And how did Travers define parental investment?
He defined it as any investment in an offspring that increases its chance of survival. But here's the key part. It has to come at the expense of the parent's ability to invest in other offspring.
Ah, so it's a zero-sum game.
In a way, yes, because the female has already paid that huge non-transferable cost up front. She becomes the limiting factor in reproduction.
Okay, so if the female is the limiting resource, then the male, as the sex that invests less initially, has this evolutionary incentive to, seek out multiple partners to maximize his gene transmission?
That's the logical outcome.
And that sets up this unavoidable tension, sexual conflict.
That's the term for it. The conflict predicts that males will be selected for traits that enhance their access to mates, sometimes even overcoming female resistance. It sets the biological stage for some really difficult behaviors, like sexual coercion.
And more subtly.
More subtly, it might underlie the common finding that men are statistically more likely to misinterpret friendliness as sexual intent.
That feels like a big jump. How does the theory get from the cost of sperm to a cognitive bias like that?
Well, the theory would say that ancestrally, the cost of missing a reproductive opportunity, a false negative, was way higher for a male than the cost of misinterpreting a signal and getting rejected, a false positive.
So better to be wrong and try than to be polite and miss out, evolutionarily speaking.
The system might favor that low-cost, high-frequency assumption that an interaction is sexual, because the potential payoff is huge, while the cost is just, some social awkwardness. It all tracks back to that initial gamete asymmetry.
That connection is it's profound. So let's scale this up again to how a whole family might allocate resources. This brings us to the Travers-Willard hypothesis from '73. How does this guide what parents do?
TWH predicts that parents who are in good condition, so high status, plenty of resources, good health, they should favor offspring of the sex that has a bigger variance in reproductive value.
Which is usually males.
Usually males in polygynous species. If you've got the resources, your son has a shot at a high status male to reproduce as well.
And the reverse is true for parents in poor condition.
Exactly. Parents in poor condition should favor daughters. Why? Because even a daughter born into a low-resource family has a pretty good chance of finding a mate and reproducing. A low-status son might have zero chance. It's about getting the best return on a very limited investment.
And do we actually see this playing out in human populations?
And we do, especially in high-stakes environments.
Right.
The sources highlight the Mukogoto of Kenya.
Right.
They're low in the regional status hierarchy, and they show classic female-biased investment. They wean their daughters later, nurse them more, and are more likely to get medical care for girls than for boys.
And this actually has an effect.
A measurable one.
Yeah.
The girls end up having better growth performance.
But the sources also point out that in modern societies, like in the US, a lot of studies find, nothing. No link between socioeconomic status and sex-biased investment. Why is it so inconsistent?
I think this is where we have to be really careful about methodology. You have to look at how the data is gathered.
Right.
Researchers separate physiological outcomes, like the sex ratio at birth, from psychological measures, like asking people who they prefer to adopt.
And then there's what people actually do.
Exactly, the behavioral measures. Time spent, money spent. And the sources suggest that those behavioral measures, what parents do, maybe unconsciously, are much more likely to support the TWH predictions.
So parents might genuinely believe and say they don't favor one sex.
Of course.
But their unconscious actions, where they allocate that scarce time or money for medical care, that might still follow the evolutionary script.
It's that disconnect between an explicit belief and an implicit evolved strategy.
This push and pull brings us right into modern human mate selection. Following these economic rules, what do women really prioritize when choosing a partner?
Well, women are consistently more selective than men, which fits with everything Travers predicted. Physical attractiveness is definitely, an initial filter.
Sure, cues like symmetry or height signal good genes.
Right, but that's just the filter. For a long-term partner, it's actually pretty secondary. We're talking only 10 to 20% of the total emphasis.
So what makes up the other 80 or 90%?
Traits that signal security and cooperation. Kindness is at the very top, prioritized by nearly 90% of women. Then you have supportingness, intelligence, and of course these are alongside indicators of resources like ambition and social status.
And what about on the other side? For men looking for women, what physical traits signal high mate value?
For women, it's about signals of health and fertility. The research consistently points to a few specific metrics. A low waist-to-hip ratio, or WHR, around 0.70, a body mass index, a BMI, between about 18 and 20.
These are basically honest signals of reproductive potential.
They are.
Now, you mentioned a really fascinating trade-off in the sources, the security trade-off that happens.
Yes, this is a key mechanism for relationship satisfaction. High mate value women might, consciously or not, trade a partner's peak physical attractiveness, the good genes indicator, for reliable cues of commitment and investment.
Why would they do that?
Because the research suggests that men who are rated as highly attractive are sometimes also rated as more likely to cheat or to just desert a long-term relationship.
So stability and commitment, which are harder to fake, can often trump those more fleeting physical looks.
It's like if evolution pushes us toward good genes, our attachment system ultimately requires good behavior.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings us to our final pivot. How do these deep evolutionary strategies show up in our society? This journey ends with John Bowlby and Mary.
Right, founders of modern attachment. Bowlby had the hypothesis that we have this innate attachment system that evolved for survival, to keep babies close to caregivers.
And Ainsworth provided proof.
She did, with her famous Strange Situation Procedure, or SSP. She classified how infants responded to being separated from and then reunited with their caregiver.
Which gave us the classic attachment blueprint.
They did. You have secure infants who are easily comforted, anxious infants who get really distressed and then are hard to soothe, and avoidant infants who look indifferent on the outside.
But are stressed on the inside.
Measurably so, yes. And later, a fourth style, disorganized, was added for kids who showed really inconsistent or fearful behaviors, often linked to trauma.
And these early experiences, they form our internal working models, our IWMs. How do those blueprints then guide our adult relationships? How does ancestral fear become modern behavior?
The IWMs are really the mental maps we use to navigate relationships. For an anxious adult, they desperately want intimacy, but they are constantly worried about the relationship's stability.
So they become hypervigilant.
Exactly. They're scanning texts, analyzing body language, always looking for confirmation that their partner is still invested.
Whereas the avoidant adult is running in the opposite direction.
Yes. They value their independence so highly that they often see intimacy as a threat to their autonomy. They get uncomfortable with too much closeness, and when they're upset, their defense is to shut down or create distance.
And this clash, this is the core conflict that emotionally focused therapy, or EFT, tries to solve.
EFT uses what's called the attachment reframe. It helps couples see that their conflict isn't really about the money or the laundry. It's a predictable, recurring dance that's driven by these fundamental, unmet attachment fears.
And the most common dance is the pursuer-withdrawer dynamic.
The classic negative cycle. The anxious partner, the pursuer, escalates their attempts to get connection, often by becoming critical or demanding.
Which, of course, triggers the avoidant partner.
The withdrawer who feels overwhelmed and then retreats or detaches to find some space.
And that withdrawal just confirms the pursuer's deepest fear of rejection.
Right.
Which makes them pursue even harder. It's a perfect feedback loop of fear.
And this is where the research is so important. Even though that withdrawer looks calm or indifferent on the outside, studies show their body's experiencing just as much physiological distress. They're both stuck. Both are in a defensive posture, just using completely incompatible strategies to deal with the same underlying fear.
We have really spanned the entire scale today, from the costly gametes of algae to the subtle, fearful movements of a couple stuck in a negative cycle.
And every step, from a fruit fly's courtship chase to a woman's preference for kindness, it's all guided by these core principles of investment and selection. It really shows how powerful the invisible hand of biology still is.
Absolutely. So here's the final provocative thought for you to mull over. We started by exploring how evolution wired us to seek the highest mate value, looking for status, looks, genetic fitness. Yet we ended by seeing that a secure adult attachment requires us to prioritize things like kindness, support, and stability. So to what extent are our modern relationship struggles simply a continuous conflict between what evolution demands we select for and what our psychological attachment system genuinely requires to feel safe and satisfied?